Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and he is Tom Vanderford for his weekly segment on all things Ole Miss football. All right, well, not Ole Miss football, Ole Miss sports, but we're going to branch out a little bit, and we're going to talk about Saban retiring at Alabama, because that kind of is a big deal, because Saban is the greatest of all time. You can't do anything but respect what he does. You can realize that Ray Perkins has to happen. It doesn't matter who they hire. He's not going to be Nick Saban. But Nick Saban retiring in Alabama, I guess it's nice that other schools have their turn now. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with that. He had a heck of a run, 17 years, I think 6 national championships. So he had a good run. He's a good guy. There are rumors out there that his wife may be in ill health, and if that's true,
we went on ESPN today, and they said those weren't true. Said Miss Terry was healthy. Yeah.
Oh, he's got time for them to be together. I think the world of his wife. She's meant a lot to college football, and she's a good ambassador. So I wish both of them well. And we'll see what happens to Alabama next year. They're getting hit pretty hard in the portal. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see whichever coach they pick, if they bring some folks with them or they just decide to do a rebuild, whatever the case is. I expect the spring portal to be hit fairly hard by Alabama.
Yeah, the good news is that does not include Ole Miss, because those players would not be eligible to play at Alabama. So It'll be some people being imported in. But Speaking of which, the portal opens up for 30 days for Alabama players for them to get into, and they can go SEC to SEC and be immediately eligible. What's some players that you wouldn't mind seeing Ole Miss recruit from Alabama's roster?
There's only one, Caleb Downs. I want Caleb Downs.
Well, you and everybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're going to dream big, bro. How about you?
I did a video on Friday where I talked a little bit about this, and I mentioned Caleb Downs. I also mentioned Jam Miller, the running back. He's a sophomore out of Texas. Alabama, they're pretty good running backs that come through there from time to time. If you don't get Roydell Williams, that could possibly get Jam Miller. And then Jaheim Otis out of Columbia.
Otis. He slipped my mind. I'd love to get him. He's a Mississippi kid anyway. He needs to come home.
Yeah, and I'd like to see Ole Miss recruit Caleb Odom, who just signed recently with Alabama. I think Ole Miss has a chance to get back in the game on that one.
Yeah, that flex tight end that we were down to number 2 on. Yeah, that there's a possibility there. There's a good possibility there. The Saban allure is gone, and there's a chance for us hopefully to get back in. I would love to see all 3 of those guys come to Ole Miss. It would be quite a blessing.
Yeah, the rumor is that on Thursday when we're recording this, that they're planning on building an office for Nick Saban in the Alabama so he can still come into the office and everything. And it's like, okay, Florida's been doing that with Steve Spurrier for 10 years. And look what Florida is right now. This isn't the best of ideas. Good for Nick Saban. Like I said, he's the GOAT, but just let him go do some TV. Let him be an ambassador. Let him kind of enjoy being the GOAT for about 10 years.
Oh, yeah. I've got no problem with that. But I do think that the level of recruiting will change as far as at Alabama. I don't know if whoever the new coach is will be able to attract all those 5-stars. And I'll say something else, too. I think that NIL and the transfer portal, I really do think that soured Coach Saban and possibly contributed to him retiring when he did.
Yeah, and the fact that he's 72 years old. I think Nick Saban did not want to be Bobby Bowden, to where at the very end it was very sad. I
Yeah.
think over the last 4 or 5 years, it slipped a little bit. It's
Mhm.
obvious when you look at penalties and lack of discipline and things like that. And it was just heading that way. It was going to get progressively worse. And I think now a football scoop, like I said, we're recording this on Thursday, so something
Yeah.
could happen by Saturday night. In fact, the rumor is right now that Kalen DeBoer could be announced before this show airs. So if that happens, understand what's going on. But Football Scope talked about DeBoer, Tommy Reese, and maybe Mike Norvell being interviewed. And hey, I don't think I want Mike Norvell to get the job, not because it's a fear thing. It's just that Florida State fan base, after what they went through in December, this might be the shot that just sent them over the edge.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they've dealt with enough.
So should be really interesting. And Ole Miss is on doing recruiting visits this weekend. It looks like Gerald Mincy is not coming into town
Yeah.
because, yeah, Ole Miss is planning on recruiting Alabama's roster. They're trying to hold some spots open. So
Yep. So, you might want to look at that Alabama offensive line
hmm,
because we are going to get another offensive lineman.
hmm.
I find it interesting that we're bringing Brandon Turnage in. He went to he's a local kid, went to Alabama, went to Tennessee. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a weird story because there's
Yeah.
different sides of it. I don't know exactly what's going on. I know On3's reporting that the visit's happening.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't
Hmm.
know if if it's something that, he's a low dollar NIL person or whatever the case is, come back home, yada, yada, yada. But the kid from South Alabama looks like the real deal.
Yam Banks. Yeah, I'm excited about the potential for what Yam Banks can be.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's one of those guys kind of like Saunders.
Hmm.
Saunders could, he was a corner at Miami, Ohio. He's a safety at Ole Miss. He's one of those guys that could do multiple things.
I think he is. If you want me to do comps, it'd be like Dejon Anthony.
Yeah,
That would be the comp, I think.
yeah, and Dejon Anthony's one of my favorite Rebs.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
the two forearms to the chest, knocking the ball out. I'll never forget that.
Um, let's see. And Ole Miss is supposed to get a visit from Kendrick Blackshear, who I talked to an Alabama person that was like, "Hey, I really like this guy. He's a really good player. I hate to lose him more than anything else." And they also mentioned that it's like between us and Texas, so that
Mhm.
kind of tells you the talent level that this player is running with.
Well, and it speaks well for us that Pete Golding, I'm sure, had a hand in recruiting him, and they have a relationship already established. So that makes me feel well.
Yeah, they should. Caleb Downs and Pete Golding should have a relationship.
Oh yeah,
Honestly, yeah.
man, I know. I'm getting a little nervous. I mean, you talk about Otis. If we got Otis, what that defensive line? My goodness.
Nasty. It would be if Ole Miss was able to get Jaheim Otis, it would be 2022 Georgia level defensive line.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Mm.
monsters.
Yeah.
We could just sit back and enjoy.
Yeah. Jackson Dart's like, well, I only need to score 17 to win. So I think
Yeah,
we can pull that off.
exactly.
Mm.
With all those receivers and backs and offensive line additions. Yeah, I'm proud we got the Pounds kid, Diego Pounds. He looks
Mm.
like a specimen.
Yeah.
Uh, so and he's got multiple years to play. So it's they know what they're doing, man, and I'm just sitting back and enjoying it.
Exactly. The hype train is about, as soon as Alabama makes their hire, whether it be Kalen DeBoer or somebody else, all signs seems to be pointing to DeBoer as of Thursday afternoon.
Yeah,
The good news is by this weekend, the hype train should be going again. Let's go.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah, so there's so much to look forward to, and our basketball team is doing good. I know that they were overwhelmed at Knoxville. by the pregame probably and the crowd and some other things. But they came back home and they took care of business. I think they're going to get better every game. I think they're going to make the tournament.
Yeah. They looked fantastic. They just crushed Florida. Absolutely crushed Florida.
The block shots galore.
Yeah, and they've got Vanderbilt today, as this video airs on Saturday morning.
Right.
They got Vanderbilt today. So there's a good chance at 2-1. You have LSU after that. That should be 3-1, although LSU is 2-0 in the SEC season.
Right.
But then you go to Auburn. So that's probably the next test game, the real test game.
Oh, yeah, and there's some skin in the game. We got Flanagan as a coach and Flanagan as a player, and they were both at Auburn last year. So there's a little skin in the game there as well.
Yeah, I guess they'll know exactly how Bruce Pearl is going to want to do some stuff because of that. So maybe that's advantage Chris Beard. And heck, if Ole Miss can score the ball at the level they've been scoring the ball, they can beat most anybody. Tennessee just kind of got them. They were due for that to happen. But I think Ole Miss is going to be better the rest of the season for that not happening.
Oh, I agree. In college basketball, anything can happen. Belmont can beat Tennessee. There's all kinds of things that can happen. But college football, you got to have the Jimmies and the Joes and the coaching. And I just, I'll be 58 in February, Stephen. And I have never seen the kind of talent at Ole Miss that we already are going to have next year. It's amazing.
Man, they're still trying to add to it. They never stop building.
Exactly. And I love it. I don't know if Tamarion McDonald went to LSU, went to Louisville because he wanted to or because he got cut loose, and it doesn't matter. But they're still massaging next year's roster for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team, every single day. Tom Vanderford joins the show every week talking Ole Miss sports. Thank you so much, Tommy, for stopping by, and we will see you again next week, man.
Yes, sir. Hotty toddy, everybody.
Hotty toddy.